We've been talking about, local production of local manufacturing and all those things. The cabinet met in Kisumu on Monday, like we said earlier, right? And among the things that the cabinet considered is the fact that, one, in 7 days' time or so, we're going to launch the Universal Health Coverage Program. Okay? Number two, so in preparation for that, the cabinet had approved the amendment of major health laws and introduction of some health laws, and those ones were done. And then also the cabinet had considered various other things that can be done to ensure that we have proper rollout of the health program. Now I'm looking for the cabinet dispatch. I got it. So one of the other things that the cabinet also discussed this Monday as they met was what happens to our health sector. Let me read verbatim what the dispatch from cabinet said. To breathe life to the One Health approach, the cabinet directed that the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, KEMSA, shall ensure that procurement of locally manufactured pharmaceutical products receive preference over imports, in keeping with the administration's plan to bolster local manufacturing, Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, as part of the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. That means locally manufactured, not locally sold. Locally manufactured pharmaceutical products will get preferential treatment when KEMSA is procuring.
Okay.
And then, if those are not available, once you've exhausted local capacity, now we go into tier 2 and bring in extras. Do we have that capacity locally for manufacturing of pharmaceuticals? We have an expert on this matter. Dr. Gerald Macharia is a thematic lead for local manufacturing at the Directorate of Health Products and Technologies in the Ministry of Health. He's our guest this morning. Dr. Macharia, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you.
We call that the hot seat of the Situation Room. Are you ready for the conversation?
Yes, I am.
Very good. To welcome you, CT Muga has the day's proverb. Every week, CT comes up with proverb from looks at a country in Africa and looks at the proverbs that they have in that country, and he brings us a proverb every day. This week, he's been giving us proverbs from the United Republic of Tanzania.
Yes.
Today, he has a proverb from Tanzania.
I do.
Okay.
This is our final proverb for the week. A long road cannot lack corners.
A long road cannot lack corners.
No. Not possible.
My tongue. A long road cannot
problems.
lack corners. Dr. Macharia, say that.
A long road cannot lack corners.
Yes. What's your interpretation of that proverb?
In my view, the real life situation, there's no straight line. You expect there to be ups and downs. That's my take on that.
There will be challenges along the way.
Yes.
Indeed. So first introduce us to this directorate. Directorate of Health Products and Technologies at the Ministry of Health.
Directorate of Health Products and Technologies is a relatively new directorate which was created some 6 months after realization the importance that health products play in healthcare provision, because if you went to a hospital and a good diagnosis was done and you went home without medication, to the general public is you have not been treated.
Yep.
Treatment comprises of taking some commodities in form of medication home to take for the specified period, so that to get the benefit of the medication. And of course, the baseline is get cured.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we've been talking about, local pharmaceutical manufacturing for a while. We've been talking about, like during COVID and when we saw with the advent of COVID, do we have capacity to actually produce our own vaccines? Now, even the cabinet is discussing this and saying, all right, so we shall have ways of ensuring that we have local production of vaccines that can benefit not just this country, but the region. But also, our own local dawas, do we have local production of medicine in this country currently? What's even the future? Currently, do we have pharmaceutical companies that actually produce dawa from end to end?
Yeah. The situation in our country is we have a vibrant local manufacturing of medical products. I don't want to be limited to medicines. There are medicines and other allied products.
Okay.
We have a total of 32 manufacturing companies in Kenya who are actively producing pharmaceuticals and allied products for consumption in our country. We also have five companies which are in the different stages of setting up, and one of them, two of them are vaccine manufacturing. One of them is Moderna. I think during COVID time, you heard about Moderna, which was producing COVID-19 vaccine.
Yes.
We have a local company owned by the government of Kenya called BioVax, which is in the process of setting up production of vaccines. Yes, we have capacity to produce medicines. As per now, we are not producing any vaccines, but we are in the process of setting up two companies which will produce vaccines for consumption in Kenya and in the world. It is important to note that pharmaceutical or pharma market, pharma production is a seamless market in the sense that for as long as the product that you produce WHO certified, you can produce a product today, sell it in New York tomorrow morning. That is the situation of pharma industry.
If we look at Kenya as, with specificity, what would it take for Kenya today? Because essentially what we're looking at, frontline care, or rather first responder care, the suggestion is that to produce to take what is needed from a local manufacturing and local selling point of view. What would need to happen in the country today to say that could actually be possible? That your first line of treatment would be medicines, vaccines, treatment that is manufactured locally. And we know that right now that doesn't happen. What would need to happen in order for that to be a reality?
One of the things that needed to happen was the government, the political will, because you know how our administrative landscape is. On paper, the government talked about preferential treatment, preferential procurement, whereby 40% of the product for use in our space was supposed to be procured locally. But of course, because of various competing interests, which I don't want to go into, that has not happened. But I'm happy to report that in the new administration, they have taken up local manufacturing. They've given it the first priority, and if you have seen what has happened in the last procurement, because the biggest public procuring agency is KEMSA.
Yeah.
The last tenders that were advertised, there was a specific tender mainly directed to local manufacturing, whereby we exhaust capacity locally before we move to the next level of imported product. Well, we are not in a position to produce 100% of what is needed in the country. And in the world, there are very few countries that produce 100%. You'll find even the developed countries, they produce 90, 10% comes from outside suppliers. In our country, the government, Ministry of Health, the Kenya government, the Kenya Kwanza administration has given priority to local manufacturing of pharmaceutical product in realization of the fact that if we are going to have a seamless rollout of UHC, we need to build capacity of local production because of the obvious reasons. The lessons that we learned during COVID time, the world was locked down. As a country, we import 70% of what we consume locally. And at one time, we found ourselves on the receiving end when the company which we were supposed to procure COVID-19 vaccine, that's Serum Institute of India. And when India got into a crisis, the Prime Minister of India gave a directive that there's not going to be any export of COVID-19 to any country before they get enough for their home consumption. And we were left outside there. Nobody cared what was going to happen to us. If COVID was a killer disease as it was perceived, we would, all of us, have perished.
Can I ask that in this way then, of the medicines, of the vaccines, of all of this cross-border treatment that is consumed in Kenya today, what percentage then of that at present is locally manufactured or produced?
I would like to take you to a platform. Every country talks about the essential medicines list. The essential medicines list are medicines which cater for 80% of the public need. And in our situation, we are manufacturing 15% of the essential medicines list. We are on a campaign mode to attract and interest investors in the 85%, which is not manufactured locally.
And those would still be on the essential list?
Yes.
And what could you give an idea into what is on this essential list? What kinds of medicines are we looking at here?
The essential medicines list mainly comprises of antibiotics, painkillers, some essential strategic painkillers, medicines that treat the lifestyle diseases. We all know about hypertension, diabetes, and of course, we have some products that treat cancer, which is a big problem in our space. So the main component of the list are life-saving medicines, which you find in any hospital setup, like, for example, if you're involved in a road traffic accident, we need to supplement fluids, and we need to give you the best of the antibiotics that is available to treat the injuries. So such kind of medicines.
Okay. So 15% of those manufactured locally today. And essentially, this is the first line that government is talking about today that says, look, as we roll this out, because these essential would fall into that line, your first point of care.
Yes.
So would we then be saying that what the action then is to bring in investors who would then allow 85% in this cadre of essential items for treatment to then be done at a local level? Or like you said, okay, maybe it's not possible to get to 100%, but would
at
that
least
be
boost this
at
from
least
15%
boost this from 15 to 50 even? Is that what the thrust would be?
Yes, this can be done in two ways. One, we need to interest the local the already existing companies. The main reason as to why our local manufacturers were not coming into that space is because they were not getting contract with the government. The moment we get into sustainable framework contract, that space is going quite a substantial of that space will be filled by our existing local manufacturers, because remember the investors will look at the approach as a business venture. Therefore, if they cannot make a profit in that space, they will not venture. But now, with the realignment and change of approach into tendering process, we are going to find a lot of interest from the local manufacturers. We have also gone out through our president in every visit, every bilateral meeting is talking about local manufacturing. And we have quite a substantial interest from out there. We are getting calls for investors and making inquiries on how the process of setting up a manufacturing unit in our space.
Okay. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. Number one, of these 32 manufacturing companies that we say are already in this country, are they operating at 100% of their capacity, or are they operating at lower than that?
Most of the companies are operating between 40 and 60% of their installed capacity. And this depends on the market, because you cannot produce a product. Medicines have an expiry date.
Yep.
So unlike any other sugar or any other type of consumer commodity, you cannot produce and keep them in your warehouse waiting. You only produce on requirement, because you can only store them for a certain time frame provided.
So what you're saying is many of these local manufacturing companies for pharmaceutical and allied products are operating at, let's say, 50% on
50%,
average.
yes.
So because 40 to 60, 50%. And it's mainly because of market.
Yes.
But yet, we have a capacity, if all of them are operating at even 80%, the local market would be sufficient for them. Is that not so?
Yes and no.
Okay,
Let's start with the no.
Yes.
Let's start with the no.
The market, if you look at, like I said, the essential list comprises of 862 products. And when we manufacture 128, it means even if you operate at 100%, there's some space, which is...
Yeah, there's a big gap.
There is a gap which cannot be covered unless we do diversification.
Okay.
So, yes, we can improve in that space. That is by improving the volumes that we buy locally in this spirit of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. So if we may increase the volume that the government buys locally, then the capacity can be increased. And the no is because we don't produce the whole range.
Okay.
Yes.
We need to diversify.
Diversify, yes.
And that requires investment.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes they may require investment. You can still use the installed capacity for some product.
I'm listening to what it is that is our capacity at present in terms of our manufacturing might in the pharmaceutical world. And I'm thinking of this percentage, of this capacity that we have and that we utilize, is it all consumed locally or do we export some? That's question number one. Question number two, if they were to manufacture at full capacity, do the health needs of this country, are they able to absorb everything that is actually manufactured?
Yeah, thank you. our local manufacturers quite a sizable of what is produced locally is exported into our neighboring countries, mainly in EAC, COMESA. You see a lot of our locally manufactured products available in our neighboring countries. When you walk into a pharmacy, the first thing that you see is a Kenyan-made product. And they are proud of our locally manufactured product. So export, like I said, the theme of local manufacturing is not for local consumption only. Remember, one of the advantages of local manufacturing is if we increase capacity, there is a saving of the would-be spent foreign currency.
Yep.
When you do export, you attract inflows of foreign currency. And it is also important that in our country that this space will create jobs which are needed to our young Kenyans. Now, back to the question. Yes, we are exporting. I don't have the figures right now, but we are the biggest exporter in EAC. Actually, if you ask, Kenya is viewed as the hub, the pharmaceutical hub in EAC. Now, on the installed capacity and manufacturing 100%, yes, we can increase the percentage from 50 to 60 or even going to 70 if we increase uptake from the public sector. But 100%, we may not consume all of it because of the same reason that we're only producing a small proportion of what is required in our essential list.
Then this also goes into in the East African community, because we are members of the East African community, which has several other countries. Is the government also marketing local manufacturers of pharmaceutical and allied products so that then the neighboring countries can also have the same? Say they are either buying locally or they are buying locally within EAC, which would mean that products that are produced in Kenya can also get preference in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Rwanda, in DRC.
Thank you. I think it's important I put this into perspective. There is the East African Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan, and each of the East African countries have a number of manufacturers. What happens in the East African Manufacturing Plan, products manufactured within EEC are given priority within the EEC countries. And Kenya being the largest and the biggest, of course, takes advantage of that space. Therefore, going forward, we are consolidating the gains in the plan, the EEC, so that products that are produced within our space are given a priority.
Okay.
It is also important that we look at the bigger space. If you look at the African market, it is important to note that Africa only produces 3% of the products that are consumed in Africa. So, our biggest issue is opening up the created barriers to allow free movement of goods and personnel. Reaching out in the African market, we cannot even have capacity with the existing manufacturers. If the borders are opened and we are open to the African market, the existing manufacturer in our country may not, even if they run 24 hours, they may not produce enough for Africa.
Again, then looking at the 32 in Kenya, how many of these are multinational pharmaceutical companies and how many are indigenous Kenya?
It's important that we look at manufacturing in a different way, because local manufacturing of pharmaceuticals is when a company chooses to set up a factory in our jurisdiction, whether they are local or whether they are multinationals, they are considered as local manufacturers.
Okay.
In the same space, we have 3 multinationals, and the others are local investors. And we would rather call them local investors because we don't want to delve beyond that.
Okay.
Because I know obviously the thinking is, who are the Kenyan local manufacturers? I don't want to get into that space, because we have Kenyan residents, by whichever means, who have invested in that space, and therefore they are rightfully Kenyans.
Sorry, Ndu, go ahead.
I seem to be stuck on something. Maybe you can help out here. That here we are, and we're saying that in terms of capacity, in terms of expertise and knowledge, that there are today companies, organizations that exist that have the wherewithal to be able to do this. And the need is also there. That goes without saying. The consumption capacity of Kenya is also quite high. Again, as is the need. But then we seem to be anticipating the pedal in terms of saying, because so many things would happen. You're importing a lot of medication, importing a lot, and so the prices, of course, are very high in terms of what you would apply to this medicine. Goes without saying also that for whatever was produced locally, it would be cheaper, especially for the consumer. So that makes healthcare overall a lot cheaper. So I'm still stuck at what then prevents this manufacturing on a large scale. Is it the funding? Is it the capacity? Is it the decision to implement and act on policy? Where are we at this point that says, all right, let's lurch from this place whereby we are consuming a lot more than we produce to get to a place where at least we can start to balance out those numbers?
Yeah. The question is rather touches on quite a number of diverse issues. One of them is in our space, we have the right personnel trained to work in our pharmaceutical industry. We were one of the largest producer of pharmacists in our space who are required in those manufacturing units. Then coming back to our investors, we have 2 types of investors. We have investors who have been in that manufacturing space for a long time and they have the financial might. Therefore, they don't have a big problem of diversification. Like I said, the biggest problem was assurance in the market. That is number one. And in any investment, it's also important to talk about investors around the world look at the incentives. If I have to set up a company from India or China, the first thing that I'll look at are incentives. Are we providing the necessary incentives for an investor to invest? Because pharma investment are hefty. A medium-sized pharmaceutical industry will cost you between 5 billion and 100 billion.
Shillings or dollars?
The shillings.
Medium size.
Medium size. Therefore, the investments are hefty, and sometimes our local banks may not be able to undertake, because if one company walks to a bank and it takes a loan of 100 billion,
that's it.
You can imagine nobody else. The bank is going to get shocked.
Yeah.
So we mainly, as it is now, interesting the international market to come and invest because of those hefty investments. And we have given quite a substantial of incentives in this space, because the government has waived VAT on manufacturing equipment. They have waived VAT import declaration form fee is waived for raw materials that are required for manufacturing of pharmaceutical product. For companies that are setting up in special economic zone, VAT and duty is waived on equipment, all equipment, and all raw materials, regardless of whether you get them locally or you import. Therefore, there are those incentives that you find most of the investors, international investors, are coming into the special economic zone because of that obvious advantage, especially when excise duty is waived, VAT is waived on all equipment and all raw materials, and then even when you set up electricity consumed in manufacturing VAT is exempted.
Wow.
So that is a big incentive. And also when you set up in special economic zone, the corporate tax for 10 years, you pay at a rate of 5%. Then for the next 10 years, you pay at 10%. This is a big incentive. And then we, as the government, the National Treasury allows repatriation of profit. There are countries where the repatriation of profit is controlled. In our space, you are allowed to repatriate to your whatever location. You may choose to put them in Switzerland or your mother country or wherever.
You can take everything out.
Yes, your profit.
What will your benefit be? Just local employment.
Local employment is big.
Okay.
But then you would have what kind of ownership then do you have? Because also, there's a lot that goes with the ownership of a brand. There's an ownership of an idea, ownership of an execution. Because essentially what I see, and maybe you can correct me, is that if you do have a foreign investor coming in and saying, all right, let's produce these things locally, we're also saying that, at any point, you can take the thing and go back to wherever it is that you're coming from. So what ownership does Kenya have? Of course, understanding the challenges, finances, what ownership would Kenya have of these things? And can they truly then be Kenyan brands? Or is that not is that not the goal for them to be Kenyan brands? Or are we just saying that they must be locally manufactured?
I think, like I said, in a pharma space, getting a product, a company 100% owned by Kenyan, that is not the issue.
Okay.
The issue is getting product manufactured in our local space.
Okay.
Like I said, local manufacturing is any investor who comes into our space, sets up a factory and produces medications in our jurisdiction.
Okay.
So about ownership, most of the investors may not feel comfortable if you start twisting them into giving some shareholding. That is not the practice. That's not best. That's not the best international practice. You look at countries that have made it; they will allow you to walk in. You don't necessarily have to get local shareholding. But if you move into that space, put your money, and you can see the investments are hefty.
Yeah.
We really don't want to twist you.
So the incentive here for Kenya is, one, we are saving on import.
Yes.
The amount, our import bill, and we're getting local employment. And we're also earning foreign exchange when we export into the region and elsewhere.
Yes.
Okay. I want to ask about original and genetics. You are a pharmacist. Are we talking about opening up the space at all? Anybody who wants to come, you want to come and produce genetics. It's fine. Generics. Sorry, it's fine. Original is fine.
When we go out there, we are looking for investors who will come to our space, and most of all the investors who are coming to our space are what are called generic manufacturers, and it is important that I clear this. What is this branded and generic product? What happens in the pharma industry is, if you do R&D and come up with an innovator product, you are allowed to, under Geneva Convention, to sell the product exclusively in a market, world market, for 10 years, what is called the patent period. So after the patent period, the formula becomes a public formula. Any company can take up and start manufacturing. What has been happening in our space is we have products whose patent expired a long time ago, but because of the treaties, our market is a liberalized market. We will be required to play by the rules of that open market. Therefore, we will have product the patent expired, but they are still treated as a branded product. Therefore, but since the space is open, most of those branded product companies don't like venturing into local, especially in our African. Many of them will shy away. But we have quite a number of generic manufacturers who come to our space, produce product at a competitive price. And therefore, the volumes, because when you set up a factory, you need to look at what are the cash streams, because you are doing it as a commercial enterprise. You need to make profit at the end of the day, so you must look at the volumes. And most of those generic companies have made it because their prices are competitive.
There's something that I want to ask. Yes, we get employment, but there's this question of capacity. Do we also ensure that when someone sets up their industry here, that by the time a certain period has passed, that capacity and their knowledge therein has been cascaded to the local, so that after a certain period of time, we know that at least a certain number of people are well versed in how these things are done?
Yes. In every investment, the people who are working in those industries are our locals. And of course, in the process of working in those industries, you build capacity, because knowledge. Of course, there is a component I know we're looking for. There is in pharmaceutical manufacturing, there is a component that we talk about technology transfer.
Yes.
Technology transfer, in this space, we are talking about a technology holder transferring that technology to a technology recipient, that is a local company, and there is a mutual agreement on how much you are going to pay over a certain agreed period, so that technology is 100% transferred locally. We have set a platform to attract technology transfer, because eventually we need to own the technology.
You see, there's also this little bit that we encounter, that when you allow people to come in, you also allow them to come in with their personnel. So yes, they set up locally, but there are certain areas of expertise that they will come with because we probably do not have it. It's that element. Yes, technology transferred, knowledge transfer, because practice makes perfect, as they say. And for instance, if you were to give me a hoe and ask me to dig, I would know how to dig, because as a child, it's something I learned to do as a child. Okay?
Yes.
People who've been in the manufacturing business, like some of, say, in Asia, India, it's something they're familiar with. So when they come here, yes, probably the technology they're coming with is not the latest and the most modern. That tends to be in their own countries. Now, if indeed it's something that we seek to do, but we do not force or we do not ensure, because when you talk about the 3% production, meaning there's a 97 capacity on this continent that is not exploited, it's a space we need to move into very swiftly. And without the transfer we're talking about, the intellectual property transfer and the technological transfer, we'll be missing out on an opportunity that is actually staring at us.
It cannot be put in a better way. Technology transfer becomes an important component for every country which hopes to become a pharmaceutical manufacturing hub. Yes, companies that are setting up in Nairobi, there are some expertise that we do not have, and we mainly rely on India, because India have a cross section of virtually all the personnel in the space of pharmaceutical manufacturing. Yes, we need to get into that space of technology transfer. We also need to do strategic training, like in the area of vaccine manufacturing. That's a new space, and it's called the space of biomanufacturing. We have started training in the area of biomanufacturing because that is the next field of manufacturing. Most of the common product that we consume, I believe all of you are familiar with insulin. Insulin is a bio-manufactured product, and we don't have that expertise, but we have started collaborations with the institutions that train in that area of biomanufacturing, so that we have capacity. And going forward, in the next 5 years, we should be able to produce, to have expertise in that area of biomanufacturing.
Okay. In the final minutes, paint that picture for us, the next 5 years. You said the next 5 years, at least increase our expertise in biomanufacturing. In terms of increasing our production and bringing in local investors, what are your targets?
Our target is we get up to 60 manufacturers by 2030. We'll have brought new
60
investment.
new or 60 total?
A total of 60.
48 new?
Yes.
Or 28 new?
28 new, yes. So that we get the variety. So that, like I said, 15% is produced locally. We need to increase the capacity to around 60 and 70. And that is a journey, is not an event. We need to follow the due process, attract the right skill set, the right manufacturers to come to our space to fill in that gap. And by 2030, pharma industry should be one of the biggest employer in our space.
Okay. But in terms of procurement, now with this directive to KEMSA, are we saying that immediately the 32 companies can sit assured that everything they're producing now, which is, for example, in the essential medicines list, would be absorbed by...
Will be given priority.
Will be given priority.
Yes.
And they're given priority because we are already producing below capacity. It means that they'll be absorbed.
Yes.
Okay.
They will be absorbed.
Dr. Ali, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Gerald Macharia is the thematic lead for local manufacturing in the Directorate of Health Products and Technologies at the Ministry of Health. He's been our guest.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.